Hello and welcome to the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Ben Krahe. Before we get into this episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter @bettingpod and check out the website businessofbetting.com. Guest suggestions are much appreciated. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Betfair Proprietary Limited. Betfair operates a betting exchange and is licensed in the Northern Territory of Australia. Residents of Australia can join Betfair by visiting betfair.com.au and support this podcast by using promo code BOBPOD. Please gamble responsibly. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Ben Krahe. Ben, thank you very much for joining me.
Hi, Jake. Thanks very much, mate. I feel like I'm in esteemed company here, but we'll do our best tonight for you.
No, I'm very much looking forward to chatting. Let's start with your first experiences in the betting and wagering world.
In the betting and wagering world, well, probably at the age of 3 or 4 or 5, when my father was taking me to the greyhound track. He was a greyhound trainer, not a very good one, but had a couple of winners, I guess, along the way. My grandfather was a penciler for a bookie, and they used to take me along to the dogs every week. Back then I was told that I had a bit of a photographic memory, and I had a little book with all the dog tracks of New South Wales in it and all the track record holders, and apparently I was a bit of a circus act when I was a young kid, and my grandfather would basically win money betting against other people and would sort of say, "Why don't you ask my little grandson here what the track record is at Coonabarra brand?" And I'd rattle off 25.75 or something like that, and my pop would, win. I don't know what it was back then, $1 or whatever the equivalent was back then. But so unfortunately, I didn't have much hope from that age. Always went to the track with mum and dad on road trips to the greyhounds, etc. And then dad also liked the trots. And I pretty much went every Friday night with him to Harold Park. I always sort of joke that I think I must have been conceived at Harold Park, 9 months before. Some stage he probably got a good trifecta, and here I am.
So why do you think it was trots and greyhounds in your family? Because I think people in their 20s might find it hard to believe that they could have been that popular.
Well, as we sort of just discussed off air, back in the day, they were as popular, if not more popular than of the most of the codes there. You could go to Harold Park and there would be, 50,000 people there. There was 50 bookmakers on the other side of the track on the ledger, let alone on the normal side. So I think it was just the atmosphere. Harold Park, there was nothing really like it. Going to Harold Park there, it was 5 minutes walk from the city, and you could go there and you're on top of the horses and the crowds, and it was just fantastic. And I guess that's probably what I liked. And it was a bit more, user-friendly to actually see the horses, I guess, than going to the gallops. My parents weren't really into the gallops too much. I always bet on them as a kid, never really successfully. But I think it was just the atmosphere of the trots, seeing them as close as you do, and the noises and the lights and etc. It was probably what hooked me, I guess.
Who was your biggest influence back then? Early days. Was it your father or your grandfather? What can you recall from those days?
Oh, they're both. No one in my family is any good at it, so there wouldn't have been anyone at that stage. And to be honest, I was never any good at what I do. Probably, I've been in the business now for 15 years, but I'm probably haven't been a winning punter until maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So I've sort of decided to take on board seriously, and that's when I've, decided that was going to be my career. So, to be honest, there wasn't sort of anyone in the real early days until I started working with professionals, and there's been quite a few people along the line that have definitely influenced me.
So, did you start part-time or semi-professionally, or were you a casual punter doing it for fun and entertainment?
Yes, that was it. Doing my wage every week, as we've all probably been there, and I'm quite good at mathematics, etc. So I decided one day I've had enough of losing on the punt. I want to be on the other side, and I was only into my marriage about a year, and my wife said go for it, and applied to get a bookmaker's license. And the cheapest license you could get at that stage in New South Wales was a greyhound license. You needed $20,000 in the bank, and it was sort of went up in 10 grand increments. The more, if you went to the trots, or then you went, that was just to start at the country greyhounds, mind you. So off to Cessnock Greyhounds and Singleton Greyhounds I went, got my licence, got a little bank together, and that's where I started. I did 2 days a week of bookmaking at Singleton and at Cessnock Greyhounds on a Thursday, Singleton Greyhounds on a Friday, and then every second Saturday I'd go up to Kempsey Greyhounds and actually work the gallops at the Greyhounds, the aways.
So why did you start with bookmaking in the beginning, and I guess with greyhounds?
That was the cheapest licence that I could get, yeah. So, to get a greyhounds licence, you either needed $20,000 to $40,000, depending on where you worked. To get a trots licence, you needed $50,000 to $100,000. Then to get a gallops licence, you needed, $100,000 to as much as to put your house on the line. So I didn't have anything like that when I started, and the cheapest way I could get into it was on the greyhounds. So off I went.
So what type of preparation was required to be prepared to do something of that magnitude? It sounds like you flicked a switch and had to stand at the track, or was there sort of a transition process in place?
No, pretty much, mate. It took I think something like a month to 6 weeks to get my licence. Once it got all approved, I got all the gear. I actually had back then I had a mentor from the Central Coast named Graham Walshaw, who was a local bookmaker, and he pretty much taught me the first things that I needed to know about bookmaking, and how to, back in the days, obviously, how to write ledgers on the books, and this is pre-computer days, obviously. I've still got my board, in my office now here. I've still got the board with the 6-4 and the 13-8 and all that sort of stuff on it. I've got my bag, and I've got a framed photo of my very first ledger and a couple of my old tickets still sitting down there, sitting pride of joy in my office. So it was basically within a couple of months off to Cessnock Greyhounds I went, and that was that. It went from there.
So how'd it go? Were you break even or successful even?
A good day was winning 500 or 600. I do have a story. The first time I went was Kempsey Greyhounds, and I actually had to do the aways, the gallops. And the very first race that I ever bookmake on was a hurdle in Adelaide at 11:30 in the morning or something like that. And a bloke came over and it was $1.30 shot in the race, and we used to get the prices. I lived on the Central Coast, so that was a good 4-hour drive. So we'd drive up in the morning, and my brother would be driving, and I'd be in the passenger seat writing down the prices off 2KY in the morning. That's how we got our prices, off probably someone like Mark Lambourne or someone to the equivalent back then. And there was a hurdle in the first race. It was $1.30 shot, and a bloke walked over and had 3,000 on it. And I thought, this is pretty exciting. And it was gone. This horse was gone. With 2 hurdles to go, there was another horse was probably a hurdle in front, and of course it walked through the hurdle and fell over, and the 3s on shot just managed to walk over the line in front and won. And I did $900 on my first bet, and I thought, well, this is a pretty hard way to start. But it's sort of I enjoyed it. I enjoyed going to the track. Even then, I was the only bookmaker on track. At Cessnock Singleton, I was the only bookmaker on track. I loved it. There was no one had phones in the days. You couldn't, there was no sports bets and tabs and all this sort of stuff. There was basically an on-course tote, which didn't have any money in it. So basically you were the only place where they were betting. And I loved it. Learned a lot there, absolute lot. You can only learn by doing it, but I never made any money out of doing it. It was just too hard. There was no one really coming to the races anymore. A big day would be sort of 100 or 150 people there, and everyone's having $5 bets, and the one bloke that's having a $100 bet was the one that was smart, and he'd end up sort of beating you. So we didn't really lose at the game, but we didn't really make any money out of it. And I sort of did that for the best part of 2 years, and sort of just decided I wasn't really going anywhere with it. I couldn't sort of work to the next level, and that's when I decided to try and find a job somewhere in the industry, and I saw a job with what was BetStar in the day with Alan Iskander, and I applied for it. And I didn't have any experience except for that being a bookmaker on track, but that didn't really sort of equate to anything that he had done. And I basically said, I'll fly down to see you in Melbourne, and I flew down the next day to see him in Melbourne, and he sort of liked the fact that I was eager and did that off my own bat, and offered me a job in BetStar, and I ended up being the very first person that was in the office in BetStar in Darwin.
Yeah, that was quick. So you're up in Darwin, the corporate wagering world. How did that play out?
Alan started BetStar then. There was myself and three other guys that started in the office. Ended up staying there for sort of 3 years. We did everything, We did racing, we did sport, we did all sorts of all kinds of all three codes of racing and sport. Back in the day, I can remember us doing sport on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. After we've been out all night and we're sitting there and we've got screens all over the walls, and we've got Pinnacle up there and watching the odds change, and we had to manually change every odds, to go with it on US sports, or we'd be manually changing every bloody racing odds that they were, even though there was, we had it from the call from the track, but you'd still have to actually manage books back then, and we sort of all managed to sort of get our roles in the end, and I ended up becoming sort of the guy that was looking after trots and dogs there. And back in those days, no one was really doing fixed odds of trots, and we were going up first in the trots, and we had quite a good clientele then, and making really good books, and we were offering things like the Inter-Dominion 6 months out, the Miracle Mile 6 months out, and the Tavern that weren't allowed to do that. So with any ones that were offering sort of markets, long-term future markets in the trots and dogs. So that was quite a good learning curve too. And working for Alan Iskander, that was great. Learned a lot off him, the way he does things. He obviously does things a lot different to others. And the two or three other managers that were in the company at the time, I learned great things off them too, which sort of parts of what I've brought with me to what I do now.
How different was the on-course experience versus the office in Darwin? Was it pure bookmaking in both situations, or were there sort of different aspects to it?
It was. When I was on the track, a good hold for me would be $1,000 or $1,200 for a race. That'd be a really good hold. Sometimes you might only ride a couple of bets. In fact, I remember one night on State of Origin night, we decided to go to Richmond Greyhounds, and we drove. That's a good 2.5 hour drive for us. And we went down there and we literally ate one bet on State of Origin night. I'm like, well, I'll never do it. I learnt never to do that again. But we made books. And then when we went to Darwin, we did make books originally. But Alan was sort of, I guess, a leader in his field in that he started to play heads a bit. So even though we did make books and we had, a lot of clients and whatever, the bigger clients, he sort of did play heads a bit, which is what exactly all the bookmakers do these days. I mean, the major difference would be that, a big bet when it was my own stuff might have been $500 or $600 on something. In those days, it was, tens of thousands of dollars, even sometimes into the $100,000 mark. So that was the major difference. But once you sort of knew what you're doing, it doesn't really matter what size it is. It's all the same rules, I guess.
So from there, did you transition to betting on harness and trots?
Well, look, I always bet on it. I was okay at it, but I never really had any direction in it, and I was never, I knew what I was doing. I could pick winners, and I knew how to bookmake on it, but I was still, what everyone calls a pickle punter. I stayed in Darwin for 3 years, and then our business worked very closely with a guy named Hamish Davidson, who owned a company called Sports Betting at the time, and he was down in Wollongong. And I wanted to get out of Darwin. I was from Central Coast, just an hour north of Sydney, so I thought Wollongong was pretty close to home, and I managed to get a job with him for a couple of years. He was pretty much the most influential person in my career. He was just unbelievable what he knows and the way he thinks, and he taught me what I know about sports betting, which I do a bit of now. But just everything he did was just unbelievable. He's and then he's got good family that's in the industry. Stu Davidson and Alan Davidson, his dad, are both bookmakers and very well respected, and I learned a really good deal there. I was there for a couple of years. A very small company, not a lot of clients, but the clients we had back then were massive. They were the biggest names in the industry, and it was nothing for us there to take sort of $20,000 and $30,000 bets all the time on sport especially. And I learnt not so much a lot in racing there, but I learned a lot about sports betting there and how to calculate percentages, etc., and how to calculate percentages on points, what points are worth in various sports, and how to make books. And I've never seen anyone make books like he does. The books we made at his place were just unbelievably good.
What was so unique about Hamish?
He was a punter that had a bookmaker's shop. So he used there's just ways that he did sport that uses it to make books. Like, if we needed to lay something, then it'd be, if we needed to lay something, if we needed to lay something, he'd be sort of the top odds the other side, or blah blah blah, or we'd be backing stuff the plus if we needed to get some the minus, etc. Without going into it too much, I just learnt that NRL and AFL and to a less extent union and basketball and a few other sports where points are what they are. I learnt that 1 point in NRL is worth 1%, for instance, and 2 points in NRL is worth 5 or 6%, for instance, and I use those theories still to this day to actually to bet on sport. All the sport betting I do is non-opinionated whatsoever. It's all done the very same way. So I basically make books out of it, but he taught me everything. Not everything I know, but he taught me a great deal. He's unbelievably smart guy in this industry.
So greyhounds, harness, sports betting, thoroughbreds along the way. I'm guessing now you're ready for retirement after that.
No, so there was one more in the rung. Then Hamish's place was great, but then a company called Bet365 decided to start in Australia, and the wages they were offering were, without going into it, were quite good. And I was promised to be a harness manager there, and I thought, well, I'll get into this company at the start. And this is sort of when all the English, when all the English companies were coming out. I think it was 2012 or 13, and I was actually there for a year before they actually went live. There was probably 20 or 30 of us there for a year in the offices in North Sydney before it went live. And believe it or not, about a week before they went live, I decided I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't like the philosophy of what they did and of what the English companies were going to do. And about a week before they started, I said that was it, and I quit. And that's when I started trying to become a professional punter.
Wow, okay. Are you able to share some of the reasons, or are you keeping that close to the chest?
Let's just say we didn't exactly get on with some of the management there, to be honest. But I just didn't like the philosophies. I knew what was going to be happening, and we were told it wasn't going to be happening, and it's ended up happening. So that's not how I wanted to bookmaker. I didn't want to be just a trader, and that's probably, besides the fact no one would probably have me back anymore. I just don't want to. I'd struggle to go back into that environment in any corporate now, because you just can't make books. You're literally just playing heads and playing winners and losers, and it's all about how much money each person costs you, each client costs you, or they make you. So I didn't want to be in that, and I just decided it was time. I came home one night from what I said was a pretty good bloody paying job, and I said to my wife, I hate this job and what it's going to be, and she said, just leave. And I left, and then we started what I have now.
Yeah, so take us through that. What made you at that time decide to focus on harness racing?
It was always something, as I said, I was probably best at. I enjoyed doing. So what I did then, I went to a company. I saw an ad one day for a company called Champion Picks. Back at the time, they are now Champion Bets. And a guy named Dave gave me a start there being a tipster with them. I was pretty raw at the time, but we come up. I did quite a bit of trials for them, and he decided he knew what I was doing, and we came up with some strategies on how to stake it and how to bet, etc. And I think he sold 50 or 60 memberships within a day, and I stayed there for pretty much 2 to 3 years, being, I'd like to think, one of his most successful analysts he had there. And and I sort of got a really good clientele there, and everyone sort of started to know who I was, and I guess in the industry, in the trotting industry anyway. And after being there for about 2 years, that was a great job for me. It was sort of a part-time thing, and I was still learning how to punt, obviously. It's not something that anyone learns properly overnight, and even now I still am learning things, but I was learning new techniques and new things, what to do, and I've got I was gaining quite a number of friends in the industry that are quite influential, and they're always asking for advice, and I'm always asking, how they do things, and I take a little bit from everyone. But after 2 years with them, I decided I didn't really want to continue down that path of just being forced to pump out prices if I didn't want to, if you know what I mean. So I decided that was the end of that, and that's when I decided that punting was going to be it. So that was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, I guess. I've still always had a couple of other little contracts that I do. Like, for instance, I still do stuff for a company called Giddy Up that send ratings into pubs and clubs, etc. Betfair, I've been doing the ratings for them for a few years. A few other various gigs around that I've did. I worked for HRV, which is Harness Racing Victoria, for a couple of years. I did all the prices for them that went into the newspaper, and a free form guide online form guide called Good Form. There was a bit of radio work every morning, giving the tips to RSN in the morning. So there's a lot of stuff sort of going on. I was very busy until probably, and then so after I left Champion Picks, the work with HRV went on till probably about 2 years ago. And then just social media then took over. I started just tweeting out some tips, and the followers started liking the tips. And then I'd put the hashtag Ben's Best on the end of it just as a bit of fun. Next thing you know, it was everyone wanted to know what today's Ben's Best was. And I hadn't been at Champion Picks for probably a year or so, and I decided, well, I think it's time for me to start my own website up. And that's where Racebook came along, and I thought that was a pretty clever name, Racebook, Race BK, Race Ben Krahe. It all sort of went together. And, I started selling just my own tips on New South Wales and Vic Trots. They're the two states that I concentrate on. And it all started from there.
Take us through your philosophy and approach to harness racing, and what are some of the fundamentals that you rely on?
Look, it's changed a lot over the years. I never really understood what was involved until like I said, I spoke to a lot of smart people, and I like to sort of surround myself with winners and know what they do and ask them everything. But for me, the most important, the first thing I do is I do a speed map. I work out what's going to be leading, or what I think is going to be leading. Obviously, what's going to be behind the leader, which are probably the two best spots in the trots these days, and then what's going to be in the top 4 or 5. And I try and work out if there's going to be fast speed or not much speed. And they're the horses I really like to concentrate on. I don't really like to concentrate on back markers, even though they do win. They seem to be money munchers. So the first thing I really like to do is a speed map. The next thing I like to do is check out the prices they were in, if it was a similar type of race before. So, for instance, if a horse might have been even money last start in a pretty much the same race, and today it's $8, I want to find out whether or not it was a genuine even money chance last time, and whether or not it was unlucky, or whether it was actually an $8 chance last time and was the wrong price. If I work out, well, hang on, it probably was an even money chance last time and it's $8 this week, well, I'm happy to forgive one bad run and probably be on it this time. So that's an SP profile is something I like to really get into and decide whether it was the right price or not last time. I obviously watch a lot of videos, but I watch the races every day. But my main part is watching the first 200 to see the gate speed, and you can pretty much flick through the rest of the race until the last 300 or 400 and see what happened there, whether there was anything unlucky, whether anything ran into dead ends, blah, blah, blah. Another thing that I never really took too much notice of early in the piece was drivers and how important they are. The best drivers are the best drivers for a reason, and they have so much on the other drivers. There's just levels, and one, it's not so much a secret anymore, but everyone knows that the positives of a positive driver change are just huge. Like someone that may have only had X amount of winners, and then someone like Chris Alford gets on, or Luke McCarthy, or these type of guys, a positive driver change is massive in trots. So that's another thing that I always look for, to see who's driving it and whether they've actually driven it before and won on it before. It might have been 20 starts ago they had one drive on it, and it improved, so that it might race well for that driver. And then another thing I like to look for is distances. And again, I didn't really understand how much this was in the trots, because certain horses might be able to win over a mile, and they might be able to win over 3,000 metres, but not all of them can. Most horses are sort of designed to run mile racing in trots here. And even up to, once they get to 1,900, 2,100 or 2,300, there's not a lot of horses that can actually run that distance at the right pace. So that's another huge thing about whether they can actually run the distance or not. So they're probably the 4 main indicators that I look for when I do form these days.
So some of those seem to be commonly used in thoroughbred racing and greyhounds. Have you picked apart the best elements from those different areas to utilise?
Yeah. 100%, 100%. And it doesn't matter whether I talk to some of my friends who are the best pro punters for gallops, and I've got friends that are best pro punters for greyhounds. They seem to be the same sort of things, like especially speed maps. Speed maps, obviously jockeys, drivers, and trainers, and then the tempo of the race obviously is important in all three. Probably not so much in dogs because they go hell for leather the whole way, but obviously in gallops and trots, and then the SP profile, and then that probably leads us into the next topic. But for the trots, personally, I don't actually take too much notice of the market, whereas I know most people in the gallops take a lot of interest in the market, and they sort of let that sway their opinion a little bit, I guess.
Before we get to that, I want to ask another question about your analysis approach. How much of it is gut feeling or having a sense of what will or could happen in a race?
It's funny because a lot of people do think, obviously everyone does things differently, and if they didn't, we'd all come up with the same result. Some people have databases where they spit everything they put is into a database and it spits out what they need to know. I don't have a database. I've got my head, and unfortunately I can't tell you probably what I did with my wife last week, but I can tell you where every horse ran and what they did and what price they were and whether they were unlucky or not, just from watching it and remembering. I sort of have a bit of a photographic memory that way, I guess. It's a bit of a sick one to have, but unfortunately it's what I've got. So everything's gut feel with me. If you've ever seen me price a race, I have a spreadsheet. I price everything to somewhere between 115 and 120%. I've got a program that I did once borrow from the great Stuart Davidson. It's a skewed program, and what it does, and you've talked about it before, it converts 115 to 100%, but it skews it does the favourite long shot bias. And then I go one more time. I then add 30% on top of that, which makes the market somewhere about 75 to 80%. So I'm getting real value in anything I back. So when I do my odds, I probably do them a little bit different to someone else. I sort of like to find the things I think can win, and then I try and work out what percentage I think they are of winning. So if something's, if I think something's a 50% chance of winning and I'm working to 120% market, obviously I'll put that in at 60%, which is, $1.90, whatever it is, around that sort of mark. And then I go to the next pick and I sort of work out what chance it's got, and the next pick, and then I go from there, and that's the way I price a market. The very first time I was ever told how to price a market in greyhounds, again from a man named Graham Walshaw, he always told me price the 100% market to the top four picks, and then your other 10 or 20% to your next four picks, the ones you don't think can win. And that's always stuck in my brain there too. So pretty much everything I do is gut feel. There's no database whatsoever, except for the one that's in my head. And once I look at a race and sort of analyse it, people can be amazed that I can pretty much price a race in about 3 minutes. I just go bang and can work it out. And it's, when you do it every day, 30 or 40 times a day for however many years you've been doing it, you invariably come up with somewhere between 115 and 120% just unconsciously doing it now.
Yeah, no, and I would posit that you probably have a very stringent process in place, albeit not written down or done by a computer or an algorithm, and that framework gets you to the right number ultimately. It
was funny. We did a live podcast for Champion Picks when I was there one day, and they wanted to know how to price a race, and I think it was on a Thursday, and I priced the race live for everyone via Skype, via video Skype, obviously, and they were watching me do it. And I priced the race in about, 3 or 4 minutes, and I came up with something at $2.50 or thereabouts, and it was $6 or somewhere at sports. Someone come over and goes, "This horse is $6 at sports bet." Next thing you know, it was $4. Ended up starting $2.50 and ended up winning the race pretty easy. So it was actually done live one day on a podcast. It's out there somewhere on the internet.
There's proof. It's real. So
you see the numbers. You want more control. On the Betfair exchange, you can back, lay, trade and set your own odds. So join the world's largest peer-to-peer betting platform. Get into the game within the game at betfair.com.au. Gamble responsibly.
Take us through, once you've done all your analysis and ratings, what's your strategy when attacking the marketplace?
It's changed over the years. I used to do everything just to 100% market and back every horse that's overs. Then when I started my company at Racebook, I did that method. Then I found that there's a guy that works for me that does the greyhounds, and he come up with the approach that we add an extra 30% on to just get the real good value horses. So that's, it takes the market to somewhere about 80% or 75 to 80% around that sort of part. So then, when you're betting to 100% market, you can back anything from one to maybe 5 or 6 horses in a race, which I don't have a problem doing. When you add that 30% value on top of that, you find you're probably only backing 1, maybe 2 in a race. So that was something we did, and I went through a couple of years of my old sheets and worked out that I was about 60-70% off better doing it this way, just by picking out the value ones. And when I had my company, I was always asking them what they wanted, what people wanted, and in the end, they actually, for the last few months before I stopped the company 2 weeks ago, they actually just wanted tips. It was just too hard to have every horse and every race with ratings on it. This is the nature of the beast these days. It's like 2020 cricket versus Test match. Everyone wants something simple. So in the end, I was just picking out the 2 or 3 horses that I really wanted to be on, and sending them out at a minimum price. And as long as you got that minimum price, it was still a bet. So I've sort of taken that approach into it now. I've still price every race, and I've still got a price for every horse at the 75 to 80%. But I'll go through those early markets, and again, that's probably another topic. But the one market that's out in the morning, everyone copies these days, so you have a pretty good idea which horse is going to be valued by the time everyone's up. And that's the way I approach it now. I sort of look at each race and decide which ones I really want to be and which ones tick all the boxes. Are they going to be leaders? Are they going to have the right drivers? Are they going to, everything that's sort of going for it, I want to be on those ones. So these days, I'm probably only having 1 to 2 to 3 bets per day on my own stuff.
So what about the minimum price? Are you suggesting a stake that goes with that? Is it level staking, or how do you approach it?
So it's a bit of a Kelly type thing, but I've always done this one fairly the same way. So, for instance, if you have a $10,000 bank, I like to divide that by 20, and we're going to bet that much per race. Obviously, 5% of that, but we're not going to bet that much. What I like to do is I like to bet to collect that much at my price. So, for instance, if you've got a bank of $10,000, I want to bet in a race to collect $500 at the price I market. So not the price that it is in the market, but the price that I market. So, for instance, if I think it's an even money chance and I'm betting to a $10,000 bank, that means I want to bet to collect $500. I'm going to have $250 on it because I've got it at evens. Now, if I'm getting $3, obviously I'm going to get a nice collect. If I'm getting $5, I'm going to get a better collect. So obviously the more edge I think I've got, the better result it's going to be for me in the end.
What was the genesis of that? Is it based on previous results, and that was what the numbers suggested you do? It sounds like if you're betting on an even money chance, you'll have 250 on, and as you go up the price range, you're having less on. Is that fair to say?
Only what I rate it, for instance. So I mean, if I rate it $4, I'm going to have $125 on it, but it might be a 10 to 1 chance, for instance. So I base my staking on what price I rate it, not what price the market is. Now, I know a lot of people might say they want to bet to win $1,000 or $500 at what price they get. My mentality is we are betting because the price we're getting is incorrect, so why would you be basing anything on that? We're thinking that our price is correct, so that's what price I'm basing my staking on.
Yep, okay, yeah. Now, so take us through the actual marketplace. There's obviously totes, Betfair, fixed odds. I'm not sure how many are actually liquid enough to get decent bets down. Are you treating them all together, or a component of those as an efficient market?
Well, unfortunately, I'm in the. I've probably got the code that is the hardest to get a bet on. We only have minimum bet limits in the trots in one state, and that's Victoria, and they come up an hour before the first race. So you can actually get a bet on then, obviously, across what is there, maybe eight or 10 bookmakers these days. So you can get a decent bet on then. But if you're trying to bet in New South Wales or Queensland or something else, it's just an absolute joke, the marketplace at the moment. I posted something on Twitter the other day, which was everyone found quite amusing, and even a couple of people on boards and and even someone from one of the jurisdictions have rang me about it to ask me about it because they couldn't believe it. But I tried to have 300 on a $16 shot, I think it was, and it took me 16 bets to get there. And one of the bets was 60 cents on something, another one was $8 at this, and I actually had it written on a piece of paper. It's on my Twitter there. But it was something like 16 bets to get, $300 on what was a $16 chance, to win 4,500, which was a decent bet. But, to win, that just shows you the extent of how many times you have to have a bet. And that was obviously without minimum bet limits. So that's how hard it is to get on. I'm not betting to win that big every bet. Obviously, that was just something out of the ordinary. But that's how it was, yeah.
So let's take Victoria then. They have minimum bet requirements in place now. When you're betting into those markets, let's say fixed odds, is it just you versus that individual bookmaker, or is it an actual marketplace where there are other people that can have an opinion or a decent impact on the market?
So the way the trots works at the moment, and it's absolutely ridiculous, but this is how it works. Bet365 go up first, and then everyone copies them. And it's as simple as that. So there is literally one bookmaker in Australia doing ratings or doing prices, and everyone copies them. You get companies like YouBet that might tweak them. They might have an opinion, but if Bet365 are $4, they might go $4.20 or $3.80. But that's as far as it goes. So when I said before that if you look at what's there in the morning, you know what you're going to get because every company goes the same price or within one roll of that price. So that's how weak our industry is. So if you can get on, there's actually no better time to get on because, in theory, I only have to beat one person, and that's that person that puts the odds up first at Bet365. Now, the other stupid thing about it is, and I'm not trying to put a negative of any company, etc., whatever, but we know that they're not one of the strongest companies to let people on, yet everyone wants to copy their odds. It's just absolutely crazy. So fixed odds wise, for Victoria and the minimum bets, everyone has to be up at that hour mark. But for states like New South Wales, one company might put their odds up at 9 a.m. for race 1, and then they don't put odds up for race 2 to 10:30, and then odds for race 3 are up at 10:31, and then odds for race 4 are up at 11:30, and it's just an absolute nightmare. You're literally sitting in front of your computer, clicking refresh, wasting your time waiting for the odds to come up. It just got so far to go at the moment. I don't know how it got to this stage, to be honest, in the harness racing and greyhounds at the moment, but that's how it is. At least with Victoria, they have managed to get the minimum bets, and everyone has to be up 1 hour before the first. So there is a little bit of, at least when you can get on. The other problem there being, though, is they might go up 2 or 3 hours before, and the people that can get on to win might knock the price off before you, whereas you might have to wait till then. Certain companies obviously bet better than others, and that depends who you are. I can get good sized bets on at 1 or 2 companies, whereas other people can't even get a cent on at those companies, but they can get on at others. It's just crazy. There's no rhyme or reason about it, and it's like a lottery. But as I said, if you can get on, there's actually no better time to be a punter because I am literally playing against one person. Now, they have to price every race and every horse in every race and post it live. I only have to pick the eyes out of it and beat them every so often. And if I stake correctly, with my way of staking, I might have, even if I bet into 8 races, I probably only have to win 2 to actually come out in front, which means I only have to be better than them 1 in 4 times, if you know what I mean. So that's where my edge is at the moment. Basically, it's me versus one other person.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about NFL where you have a global marketplace, global market intelligence. It's very efficient, liquid pools, and it's very difficult to win versus.
And that's why
the difficulties you're talking about trying to get on. It's probably a few old employees at Bet365. You probably know them by name,
I do.
And it's you versus them day to day.
And then, having a subscription service behind me, this was the other issue, and this is the reason I've actually had to close my company. But not only am I betting into it, but I've got 40 or 50 guys betting into it straight after me. And I've worked out that there's probably anywhere from, $6,000-7,000 going on one horse every race. You can imagine the odds are just ridiculous. Like the week before I closed my company, one of the reasons I pulled it was one horse, or it might have been a greyhound, but the official flux at the biggest bookmaker in Australia was $6 to $3 in one hit. That was the first fluck, $6 to $3. Now, I tried to send that particular dog out as a $4 chance, and if I've got 40 guys behind me trying to bet, you can imagine how many didn't get on when it's $6 to $3 in the first fluctuation.
So I'm guessing then, tote betting, parimutuel betting is just not a viable product or option for you then?
It's not a viable product. There might be $4,000 or $5,000 in the tote. So, I mean, we go back to that instance where a one-off that I wanted to have $300 on a $16 chance. What would happen to the pools if, with this, 5, even if there's 10,000 in the pool, what would happen to that pool if I had 300 on it, Now, my golden rule is price is king. I never take 1 cent unders. If I've got something $2.01 for some reason, and it's $2, I don't touch it. I'm that disciplined now that I don't touch it. I've got to get the 205 to back it. So the reason I never will back anything on the tote is because I'm not guaranteed to get that price. Even if I'm having, it might be $10 on the totes, but it's $5 fixed odds, we know it's going to firm, blah, blah, blah. So I just can't ever back anything on the tote because my golden rule is price is king, and I won't take 1 cent under my minimum price that I'll take. And people don't believe it, but I used to have a live chat page on my website, and they couldn't believe that that was actually the case. So many people would take that little bit of unders, but it's just the way it is. It's just I won't touch unders at all, under what I think it will be.
So have you got any other options then, exotics or laying horses that might be viable?
Well, the Betfair liquidity for trots is only really happens probably 30 seconds to a minute out. And by that time, yeah, okay, I might be able to back my saver, but the one that I've backed has probably gone off, to be honest. So it's pretty rare that I actually use Betfair to bet because most of the stuff I do, I've backed it early. Laying, yeah, sure. I've even at one stage had a Citybet account. I've been there because I can get on. That's actually gone now, unfortunately. But all my laying was done on a Citybet account, and that's now been a closed up thing. But that's where at least you could get on there. But as far as tote betting goes, it's just not a thing for me. I can't even remember the last time I had a tote bet. I don't even bet in the quaddies or whatever. It's just because it's something I don't do. Again, everything I like to do, everything I bet on, I need to have known that I've got value, so I can't be assured that I'm getting value betting into a quaddie. That's just my mentality. So
you mentioned you stopped the company. Does that mean you aren't providing the subscription service because of the...
Yep, that's right.
So what's next then? If I was Harness Racing Victoria or anyone else in the industry, I'd be very concerned if someone like yourself has to stop their business and their service, which is centered around their product. What else can you do, or have you thought about, what's coming up next?
Can you ring them up and tell them that, please? Because so many times people thought that I was actually criticising the industry, etc., on Twitter because I was very vocal. But we sat down with when I actually closed the doors, I had 6 services. I had a New South Wales Gallops, I had New South Wales Victoria, Queensland, Tassie Trots, and a Vic Greyhounds. And I sat down with a couple of my blokes and we went through how many people subscribe to me, etc. And we come up with a figure conservatively of about $25 to $30 million going through my business into the industry. And yet the jurisdictions thought I was having a go at them by trying to get stuff improved, blah, blah, blah. So, it's their loss now, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're basically pumping oxygen into their product and they aren't happy about it, it sounds like.
I mean, some of the blokes that work for me actually said that these blokes should be paying us, but I never thought that as much as that far. But they don't understand how much money was actually contributed by just the people subscribing to us. Like I said, we had sort of, you can do the sums. We had anywhere between 35 and 50 people, or 40 people, 50 when it was going well, in 6 services. At some stages, probably turning over $3,000 or $4,000 each per day. You can do the sums there and work out what that is for a year, but it's plenty.
So what's next for you then?
Yeah, so we had to close the business down, basically because of the reasons I outlined. I never wanted to be a company that gave out bullshit results. All our results were transparent. They were updated every day. They were done fairly. The members voted on how we should actually record the results. So everything was done transparent. I never want to be one of those companies that said we're getting $5 and everyone's getting $3. It wasn't what it was about. the last straw came that day when the fluck was $6 to $3, and about 30 guys just were emailing me saying, we can't get these results, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, that's it. I'm never going to charge people for bullshit. That's just not what I do. So I closed the doors. So I do have a couple of ongoing contracts at the moment still. I still do work for Giddy-Up. I still do stuff for Betfair twice a week. That's free on the Betfair hub, so the ratings are there for free on a Thursday night and on the weekend. And and basically I'm just going to become, besides that, become a professional punter. I've got my guys that work for me. I'm still going to get a bit of information off them, and we're going to help each other out a little bit. But other than that, it's now going to be, hopefully, I can continue to bet full time now.
So what's the trajectory of the industry in general then? If you're shutting up shop and others may be forced to follow, what's left for the industry to hold on to moving forward, do you think?
To be honest, I can't see how there's going to be more than 3 or 4 bookmakers in 5 years' time. You've got all this stuff about the point of consumption taxes coming in. That's going to hurt. It's only going to make bookmakers give us worse odds. In the trots, I've already got to cop stuff like 135% in a 5-horse race. There was a race there tonight. I'm not lying to you. I wrote it down. There was a race there today where they were betting $1.06 the favourite, $2.85 the next horse, and 100-1 the next 3. And there was another race where they were betting $1.41 the favourite, $1.86 the next horse. I mean, come on. This is the sort of stuff we've got to get dealt up with in this industry. So I really don't know.
Who's that good for? Are there owners that are profiting, or are drivers getting a fat check each week? Or I'm guessing there's no one at the track.
Well, no one's going to be betting into that. No one's going to be betting into that. No one's going to the track. I actually went to Lismore Greyhounds, believe it or not, last night myself. I had a dog down there. So I went to Lismore Greyhounds, and there was about 30 people there, no bookmaker on track, So I think there's only going to be 3 to 4 bookmakers on track. I think it's going to be the tote. For me, I think the tote's dead. I think I can't see how the tote survives, to be honest, except for your mugs that are betting every day in the pub, etc. But for any serious punter, I can't see how they bet into a tote. I'm pretty scared for it, to be honest, and that's why I'm looking at other ways to bet. That's why I've got a couple of contacts that are Gallops people that I get and that I bet into their stuff, and I'm even happy to subscribe to someone else's if they're any good. And that's why I'm concentrating on doing quite a bit of sports betting as well, because that's the future in it, I think.
So we have to finish or leave this on a positive note. Any harness racing aficionados, they might remember the big names of the 90s and 2000s even. Who are some of the best harness horses that you've seen and remember, and maybe some of the best races that stand out throughout your time?
Christian Cullen's my favourite ever. I think you mentioned it before. Christian Cullen was I was there when the night it won the Miracle Mile at Harold Park, and it was unbelievable. Just never seen a horse like that. Horses like Black's a Fake. I had my best win ever on a horse called Mr. Feelgood, winning the Inter-Dominion at the Gold Coast, so I'll always remember that one. And then, the days like now, you've got horses like Lazarus, which has unfortunately gone to America, and then there's, some new up-and-comers that are coming. But for me, I just love Christian Cullen. He was my favourite. That's the glory days. But I don't buy into these horses are better now than before. It's like any sport. When you were the best at your time, you were the best in your time. There's no sort of comparing champions of different eras for mine.
Ben, thank you very much for your time. It's certainly an area that I'm not an expert at, so it was a pleasure to chat and get your insights and thoughts on the industry, and all the very best with the next phase coming up for you.
Well, Jake, thank you very much, and I really appreciate it and had a good time. Thank you.